Wandering into the dark, murky swamps of Morytania, you'll come across a civilization like no other. Built upon the conquered lands of Hallowvale stands Darkmeyer, and within those dark walls live a blood-hungry race and their lord who is thousands of years old. Just before we start, once again, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who watched the last video and for all the comments that you guys left. The support has been overwhelming and I'm glad that you enjoyed the video. I also want to say hello to the 300 plus subscribers since that video was uploaded, and once again, thank you for helping me reach 1000 subscribers. I hope you enjoy the videos going forward, and if you have anything you want to hear about, just give me a shout. But anyway, let's get into it. Originally, vampires hail from a world called Vampyrium, which also had Yarasa and Nilokas as native species, and the only real description we have is that this world had blood-red skies and forests of darkwood. The vampiric society was tribal in nature, with Loanil Vegidiad Drakan, but I'm just going to call him Drakan, recounting how his father had taken him and his sister hunting in their earlier years, and how important this ritual was. It was what defined a vampire. He even grew to respect his sister, remarking how she had talent that was the best he had ever seen. This didn't stop Drakan from becoming one of the most powerful amongst his kind though, and through various victories at the Night of the Blood Moon festivals, everyone was aware of his power. Though that all changed when thousands of years ago, Zaros discovered the planet and descended upon it, visiting the vampires. He taught them of society and culture, and essentially laid the foundations for the vampiric society that we know. Though Drakan would grow to resent this, he took this opportunity that was presented, and with the organisation and several of Zaros' teachings, they quickly became the dominant species on the planet, outmatching the Yarasa by miles. As time went on, 8 vampire houses arose to form an aristocracy that governed the whole of Vampyrium. These were houses Alspe, House Drakan, House Gratzi, House Jovkai, House Miamel, House Pyra, House Shadum, and House Vita. This is how the vampiric society had functioned for millennia, in a seeming peace and dominance that couldn't be shaken. That was until a young vampire named Loanil Drakan took leadership of House Drakan. Proving his prowess in combat numerous times, he subjugated the other houses and pulled them under the House Drakan banner, with the Gratzi and Pyra houses being wiped out entirely. During the Second Age of Gielinor, Zaros returned and requested that they join his cause and contribute towards his empire back on Gielinor, and they happily agreed. After all, this was the god who had taught them the way to conquer their own world. Many vampires left and joined Zaros, including prominent leaders of various houses, but unfortunately it's not known how it affected Vampyrium in the long run. All that is known is that when the exodus from Vampyrium happened, Drakan was one of Zaros' most powerful and high-ranking followers, though this wouldn't satiate the power-hungry vampire for long. Loanil Drakan was one of the main players in the rebellion against Zaros, being in the same room when Zamorak confronted the Empty Lord. Why did he betray him, you might be asking? Well, Zamorak had promised that if they achieved victory, the House Drakan could have the lands of Hallowvale as his prize for loyalty. And once Zaros had been defeated and the God Wars began, Drakan amassed an army of vampires and werewolves, and they began to pour forth into Hallowvale and fight the Icene and humans that resided there. Despite their numbers, they were unable to attain total victory, with skirmishes allowing for victories on both sides. Hallowvale for its entire existence had been ruled by the Icene queen Epharte, who was wedded to a human named Acertes, which was seen as a very controversial marriage as humans were often treated as second-class citizens within the region. The queen was a botanist as well, who bred all matters of plant life to try and combat the vampires, and even bred the blisterwood tree that would help them in fighting back against this overwhelming force. It was also during this time that the hallowed sepulchre would be safeguarded to prevent vampires from entering. It seemed to be a stalemate until Verzik Vita and Loanil's brother Rhaenys came to Lord Drakan's assistance, learning of a secret entrance to the castle of Queen Epharte, who currently rule the kingdom. Sending a few vampires inside for a stealth operation, they captured her husband. Epharte even surrendered on the same day to try and convince Drakan to spare him. Well, let me tell you, that did not happen. No details actually exist of what happened to the queen, as only Loanil himself knows, but we do know that Acertes became Vanstrom Klaus. Following the successful conquest of Hallowvale, Lord Drakan had Darkmeyer be built over the ruins of the Icean Queen's former city, with the establishment of the ghettos of Myreque to serve as a pool for human blood tithes. Due to the contribution of Vampyres and Rhaenys during the war, they were gifted with a former queen's royal castle, which Vampyres modified to her own liking and created the Dictator of Blood to entertain herself and the vampire nobles. The Justiciar Physani had also decided to defect to Drakan's cause, believing that Saradomin had abandoned them, where Drakan had accepted Physani's offer of converting her troops into blood tithes and thralls in exchange for offering the lives of countless Saradominist villagers. And once this dirty deed had been done, they were allowed to create their own settlement of Sleep, where the Sisterhood was officially founded. Under Drakan's rule, all humans and werewolves had to pay blood tithes, though only the citizens of Sleep would willingly comply. Two major conflicts broke out with Saradominist troops during Lord Drakan's long rule. The first was a crusade launched by the Barrows brothers late in the Third Age, during the height of the God Wars. The aim? Simply take back the hallowed lands the vampires had defiled. They believed they would succeed due to them being empowered by their gifts from a mysterious stranger. I wonder who that could be. And obviously they had an army of thousands of loyal Saradominist soldiers and mercenaries, and they were doing quite well with their crusade. They culled a great number of vampires and gained significant ground into the heart of Morytania, but this stopped as they were approaching the walls of Darkmeyer, where the mysterious stranger intervened and stole back the power he had given them, which led to the deaths of the brothers. The second conflict began in the year 1100 of the Fourth Age, and it happened when Drakan, emboldened by his previous victory, executed his plan to expand westward into Misthalin across the River Salve. This culminated in the Misthalin-Morytania War, where a priestly warrior named Ivandis Seergaze discovered a previously unknown weakness of the vampires. Drakan's plans were thwarted and he was defeated, where his forces were pushed back and the river was blessed by the 7 priestly warriors, though some may argue it was Saradomin himself who blessed the river. The Temple of Patadomus was built over the site of the blessing in commemoration. A small fact to mention is that after this war, Drakan had banished his brother Draenor due to his weakness, and he wandered past the River Salve, which greatly weakened him. He eventually made his way to Draenor village. During the rest of the Fourth Age, Drakan continued to rule with an iron fist, or an iron fang, demanding blood tithes from human settlers that built Canifis, Fenkenstrain's castle, and Port Phasmathus. Though the first two gave in and offered their blood, Port Phasmathus refused, and so the lowly port was besieged. That was until the Ectofunctus was built, to protect the town. Though this did repel the vampires, all of the inhabitants in the town were trapped in a state of undeath, which led Drakan to abandon his siege as ghosts are of no use to him. Another creation was the Hamelchemy lab, which found that vampires could in fact survive without blood, and that the viability of blisterwood weaponry being especially deadly against vampires, especially the pureblood nobility, was a major security issue. He even wanted to learn about the Shadow Realm, giving a dark beast to a researcher who was promised massive amounts of blood in return for his studies on the creature. Though the vampire researcher managed to manipulate the dark beast to travel into the Shadow Realm, the results of the research are currently unknown, as he followed the creature into the Shadow Realm to meet the beast's master on the other side. Though Drakan had complete dominion over Morytania, he scorned what his life had become, pure complacency at the art of blood farming and recognising the vampires had in fact grown lazy, not needing to hunt for their prey. Another point to mention is that Drakan had been obsessed with the Stone of Jas during this time as well, so much that he left the affairs of his kingdom to his family. It's actually unknown when the Stone of Jas was in the Dale Essence mine, but the former plinth is currently sat there empty. His obsession may lie with him witnessing Zamorak's ascension to godhood, and him potentially desiring the same power for himself, and him using the stepping stone of Jas to get there. Now, would it be a lore video if we didn't get involved? We encounter the vampires throughout the Myreque questline, and at the moment there's only 5 quests. In Search of the Myreque, In Aid of the Myreque, Darkness of Hallowvale, A Taste of Hope, and Sins of the Father. In Search of the Myreque has an enigmatic stranger named Vanstrom Klaus enlisting our help in delivering weapons for an organisation called the Myreque. We head down to Morton and convince a fellow to let us use his boat, of which we use to go into the hollows and find the Myreque hideout. We speak to a guard named Kerpile Fjord and explain that we have weapons for them, and we of course answer some questions about the organisation. Once we've convinced them that we're here to help, we get led into the hideout, where we speak to Veliath and the group, where the weapons are readily accepted before a strange mist begins to cover the hideout. Veliath realises that it's a vampire, and before we know it we see Vanstrom Klaus, the stranger who we offered help to. He transforms into his vampire form and kills 2 of the Myreque before disappearing and summoning a hellhound. We deal with the hellhound to prove our loyalty to the Myreque, and once we do this, Veliath explains he'll speak to a superior to see if we can be instated into the group, and then we take our leave. Moving on to in aid of the Myreque, we now help the group move into a new hideout located in Berg di Roth, which would allow them to be closer to their vampire oppressors and conduct operations much more efficiently. Within Berg di Roth, we clear out the rubble from the bar basement, restore the general store, repair the bank, repair the furnace, allowing the town to once again have some semblance of order and civility. We're just absolutely great adventurers, aren't we? We return to the group and we are instructed to help one of the group named Ivan traverse the swamps to get to the Patadomus temple, which we do successfully. And once we get there, we learn of a weapon that could help the fight, so we construct a Rod of Ivandis and give it to the Myreque in Berg di Roth. Darkness of Hallowvale sees us infiltrate Myrditch, the slums of Darkmeyer, to see if we can find support inside of the Sanguinesti region for the Brewing Rebellion. Taking a small rowboat, we arrive in Myrditch and climb through and past the walls, where we speak to Old Man Ral who offers us aid. We go through the absolute maze of a city, while paying blood tithes to the Firewatch every so often. We eventually speak to Vetida Cephalatus, telling him how we want to overthrow the vampires. We make our way back to Berg di Roth, where we are then told to go to Patadomus. Witnessing that werewolves have managed to cross the River Salve, something they shouldn't be able to do, we inform King Roland before returning to Berg di Roth. Once we get there, we're tasked with making contact with Safalan Hallow, who is the Sanguinesti division leader for the Myreque. Making our way back into Myrditch, he tasks us with sketching out Castle Drakan, and unfortunately, we're ambushed during this mission. Vanstrom Klaus knocks us out but stops short of killing us, as the servant of Venescula Drakan named Sarius Guile saves us. She gives us a long-winded hint to find a laboratory, which we promptly inform Safalan and Vetida of. We investigate the lab and find a book that we take back to Safalan, who then tells us to take a sealed message to Veliath Hertz to finish off this quest. A Taste of Hope has us head to the Theatre of Blood to talk to a man named Garth, who tells us the tale of Seraphina, a warrior who braved the trials of the theatre and emerged victorious, with her prize being freedom from blood tithes. We then witness Vanstrom and Rannis Drakan enter the theatre, so we head to Safalan to inform him of this development. Eventually, we end up making our way atop the theatre and sneak around it, avoiding obstacles and dangers, where we then reach a window that allows us to peer into a meeting between Rhaenys, Vanstrom and Verzik Vitha, who gifts them an abomination to help track down the Myreque. Returning to Safalan, we report what we saw. Deciding to investigate Seraphina's home, and see if she knew more weaknesses for the vampires, we visit that home and come to learn that the tale was actually false. She didn't escape the fangs of the vampires, and was just used as a tale of false hope for the citizens to endlessly attempt the theatre. We head back to the hideout and we are ambushed by the abomination that we saw before. The abomination kills Mercatus, Andis and Flagian. It then goes to attack Safalan, which causes him to unleash a flash of blue light, weakening the creature immensely. We take care of the abomination and lay it to rest, travelling to a small room under Old Man Ral's home that used to be the location of the Myreque. Here is where we learn of the Ivandis flail and construct one using an enchanted emerald sickle and the Rod of Ivandis, and we concoct a plan to confront Rhaenys Drakan, where he plans to publicly announce the death of the Myreque. Once Rhaenys' speech begins, we interject and exclaim that the Myreque aren't dead, and we challenge Rhaenys Drakan to combat, which he agrees to. We, very evidently, end up killing him, though he is a hard boss fight, and we end up giving an inspirational speech to the Myrditch citizens, before returning to the hideout and celebrating that we've given hope to the destitute citizens. This is right before we see a short cutscene of Venescula and Vanstrom looking at Rhaenys' corpse, stating how Lord Drakan will be displeased, and how Venescula is counting on it. This leads us up into the latest quest, released in 2020, Sins of the Father. Word of Lord Drakan's reappearance has spread, finally showing his face after many years of being away from the public eye. After all, he does want to avenge his brother and eradicate the parasite that he perceives the Myreque to be. Starting this quest, we travel to Sleep and speak to Veliath outside the church, being told how a plague has beset the town that's caused everyone afflicted to fall into a deep sleep. During our investigation, we tail Carl the barkeep in a section that reminds me of an Assassin's Creed tailing mission, keeping out of sight until we see him speak to Croy, a vampire herbalist, about us. This is also where Vanstrom and Damien Lucert visit Croy, telling him about the elixir of everlasting, created by the Sisterhood to induce sleep but elongate the lives of those afflicted, which leaves us to connect the dots and figure out that the drinks were poisoned within the bar. Once they leave, we enter the lab, kill Croy and destroy what we can. We return to Veliath and report our findings, where we hear about rumours that the vampire population has been growing, so there's more and more demands for blood types. We decide to go and check in on Pathodomus to see how Ivan is doing, and we find out that Ivan is actually a descendant of Ivan the Seergaze, one of the 7 priestly warriors who originally blessed the River Selv. We continue on with our investigation and sneak to spy on a meeting between Damien and some werewolves, where we learn that they have kidnapped a family of 3 for the vampires. Once the meeting is over and we're about to tail them, Vanescula appears and entangles us. She reveals that she's offering a chance to kill her last relative, Lord Drakan himself. Refusing to share her plans further than this, she tells us to go to the Icene graveyard, as long as all the Myreque are there, which sounds like a trap, right? Vanescula continues that she already knows where the Myreque hideouts are, and if they don't all attend, she'll kill everyone anyway. Everyone ends up attending and Vanescula explains the situation. Humans are dying and the vampire numbers are growing, leading to a huge shortage of blood. And despite the crisis, Lord Drakan himself has remained absent. She wishes to overthrow her brother to return the civilization so humans and vampires can coexist in peace, like they did during the Zarosian Empire. During our time at the Icene graveyard, we also learn of Safalan's heritage and the truth of his power. He's actually half Icene, as he is the son of the last queen of Morytania, but he has no memories of his long life. This is down to the amnesia that Vanstrom gave him at some point in his life. Once Safalan learns of his heritage, we find out that his father actually is Vanstrom Klaus. After a short mission at a laboratory, we move on to our next objective, infiltrating Darkmeyer to obtain a Blisterwood branch. We obtain a Via Noble outfit from an unsuspecting vampire, and modify it to our needs. We kill Damien Lucert in Cronewick Manor and obtain his blood to mask our humanly smell from the Via Watch. Once we have everything we need, we make our way towards the Arboretum in the middle of the city and come across a difficult guard who is expecting some slaves that have yet to arrive. Who gets the task of tracking them down? Us. Who else? We find the initial humans who were promised but find that they were already paid for and we should try and find others. But Vanstrom enters and interjects, arguing that they were already promised to Desmodus the guard, and orders the Via Noble to return them. Though Vanstrom is about to recognise us, Sarius once again stops him, leaving us relatively safe to continue with our mission once again. We return to Desmodus, who now lets us into the Arboretum, and we rehydrate the tree before cutting off 8 logs and returning to the Icene graveyard. Speaking to Vanescula, she explains that she had her servant save us from Vanstrom, and that she's given Vertida the required information to craft the weapons. We then create the Blisterwood sickle and attach it to the Ivan this flail. Once we're ready, we speak to Vanescula and she will teleport all the Myreque to the front of Castle Drakan as prisoners. Though she manages to convince Vanstrom of her ruse, Lord Loweneel Drakan exits the castle doors and declares he knows Vanescula's true intentions. Enraged, he kills her Via servant and instantly subdues his sister, ordering Vanstrom to kill the rest of us. Safalan tries to reason with Vanstrom, but is disregarded, being knocked out, and this is where we fight Vanstrom Klaus. Though the fight drags on, Safalan will beg Vanstrom to stop and to remember who he once was. He then reveals that he remembers all of his human life, how he even chose to kill Larnia, his daughter and Safalan's sister. This enrages Safalan, who unleashes his Icene power, which incinerates Vanstrom, who perishes with nothing being left where he stood. This does knock Safalan out, and as he's unable to move, the Via Watch quickly start moving on his position. Veliath decides to leave Safalan behind, and Ivan teleports all 3 remaining Myreque members out. In shock of the sheer power of Lord Drakan, the deaths of so many Myreque, and Safalan's fate being undetermined, Veliath declares the Myreque as dead, leaving us and Ivan. Ivan asks to be left alone, and decides to stay at the hideout. We may have won a victory over the vampires, but at what cost? The Myreque questline is far from over. Though these current quests are different to what happens in the RuneScape 3 version of the questline, with numerous differences being shown on screen now, as well as more quests being featured, the way that the old school version will end should be interesting. Something interesting to mention quickly is the Shadow Realm, and how it's slightly mentioned earlier within the Vampire story, and is beginning to crop up throughout multiple questlines now. I don't know when Jagex will finish the questline, but eventually we will see Loweneel Drakan again, find out the fate of Vanescula and Safalan, and I guess what the overall plans are for Drakan and his cohorts. I'm aware I cut down a lot of the quests spoken about as I tried to trim to the most important bits of the story, so I hope I've done a good job for you all. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please do like and subscribe, it'd help out the channel a lot. And as always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.